Guys, what's going on? Welcome to Cereal at Midnight. My name is Heath, and I'm tremendously excited because I am joined for this conversation by author Stephanie Kane. Stephanie, how are you?
Fine, and thanks for having me. I'm a real fan of your podcast.
Oh, thank you very much. We're here to talk about Object Lessons, which is the new your new crime novel. Your story is so interesting. You're a crime novelist, but you also come from the real world of the courtroom. You are a lawyer. There's so much to discuss here. First of all, how did you always want to be a writer, or is this something that kind of came out of your experience?
It actually was my exit strategy from practicing law. But I did, I grew up in New York City and we had all these, went to public school. We had to write all these little composition books of, stories of little girls in covered wagons and stuff like that. So I was always scribbling away when I was a kid, but I never planned or really imagined being a writer. I just kind of fell into it after being in law for a certain period of time. And also because there was one story I was burning to tell. And that sort of became the engine and the motivation for learning how to write a story. So that came pretty late in life.
Well, that you've opened the door for the. So, what was the story? What was the one story?
Well, the story that has basically consumed my entire writing career and my adult life is a murder that I was involved in back when I was in college. Just to put it very briefly, I was about to get married, and my mother-in-law was beaten to death in her house, basically on the eve of our wedding. And she had really disapproved of the wedding. We were college kids and from very different backgrounds. And so I always felt like maybe the marriage or the wedding had been the trigger for this brutal murder. Her husband, my soon-to-be father-in-law, was arrested for the crime back in 1973 when this happened, and then the charges were dropped pretty a few months later, and we got married, and we were married for almost 10 years, and then we got divorced. But I never stopped thinking about that crime because, first of all, I felt a little bit guilty about it because I thought that the wedding might be the trigger, or at least one of the triggers, and it just never left my mind because it was totally unanswered. All these unanswered questions about it because nobody would ever talk about it. We didn't know why the charges were dropped. Everybody just wanted to move on with their lives. And of course, you don't really move on from something like that when it's sort of a cornerstone of your idea of who you are in the world. So to fast forward 30 years, I remarried, and my new husband said, "Well, how come the charges were dropped?" When I told him about it, I said, "I have no idea." And he said, "Well, don't you think it would be a good idea to find out?" And that started me researching the case. And my research into the case turned into my first published novel, which was called Quiet Time. It was a standalone mystery that was published by Bantam in 2001. And, I completely fictionalized the crime. I only knew, half of the story from, what I could get from the court record and stuff like that, which didn't answer a lot of the questions. So, I fictionalized it, and that book became my laboratory for learning how to write a book. It went through like 20 drafts or something, and it was acquired by Bantam and had a very short shelf life because I think it was published the week of 9/11. And so, it just, people had other things on their minds, and, it had a short life and a quick death. And I went on to, publish other novels, a series of legal thrillers, and then to my shock, about 4 years after that Quiet Time came out, somebody saw in a late night rerun of a public TV interview of me that had been recorded like 4 years earlier when the book came out. She saw me talking about the book and she recognized me. It was my father-in-law's sister, So the killer's sister, who was by then in her late 70s, she recognized me after 30 years, went out and bought the book, and in kind of a crisis of conscience, she came forward with a confession that her brother had made to killing his wife. So, the first thing I knew about any of this was I got a call from cold case cops asking, if I was that person and, what did I know about the crime? And I became a witness in the case. And for the next 10 years, my writing was completely sidelined because all of my drafts and everything were subpoenaed. I didn't talk about the case to anybody but lawyers. And then when the case was finally resolved, I wrote it as, I all of a sudden I had access to a wealth of information, police records, audio tapes, interviews, crime scene photos, all these things that I never had seen. But they were all of a sudden in my possession. So I started, I wrote it as a true crime book. And first I wrote it, it became a blog that I posted on my website, and then it turned into an ebook that I put out last spring. And to my delight, it was picked up by a traditional publisher and is coming out a year from now in a book called True Crime Redux. So it's going to be coming out in print and audiobook and ebook. So that book, that story, I should say, has bookended my writing career. Started out as fiction, ended up as true crime. And in the middle, I wrote 2 crime series, fiction series. So that's how I started writing and sort of come full circle back to the original story that made me write in the first place.
It's fascinating, and because you blogged about it as you were exploring the process, you brought people with you, you brought readers with you, and it was an instructional opportunity as well, because people were able to discover and kind of, they experienced it with you, but they were also able to kind of come along with you on this journey. And I know you do a lot of you're very available with instruction and trying to help people figure out how to write. I read a specific post from you. It was an instructional basically about writing what you know, take what you know and how to turn that around. And I just think that's tremendous.
Well, it's very rewarding because, the older you get, the more you want to leave something behind. And leaving something behind means giving things to people. So it's very, very rewarding for me to give writing workshops and stuff. Because for one thing, for purely selfish reasons, it forces me to think about what I think about a specific area. And it makes me think about how to deliver it in a way that the people who are listening can get value from it. So that's a challenge. Every workshop I deliver is a learning curve for me. And that's what really jazzes me about writing. It's the learning curve. That's why I can't write the same thing over and over again. So it's very rewarding for me. And I hope, people get value from it.
I personally have. I love your writing, and it has an approachability that, it's crime writing, it's legal system stuff, but and sometimes in the hands of certain storytellers, those can be fairly dry, but your work never is. It's so rich with characterization and the humanity behind the people. I mean, they're flawed people, you really get into they have very ambitious, they have character flaws, and you write about it in a way that's so it welcomes you in. It's not like a barrier. So thank you.
Here, that's everything to hear. A reader who's touched by it and likes it. Thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely. I'm curious, hearing what you're saying about the experiences. Did you have lawyer? Did you want to go into the legal system before this experience? Did you have aspirations before this experience, or do you think this experience propelled you into where you ended up?
I was my husband, who was the son of this couple where the murder happened. We were sophomores when we met, and we actually met in a karate class. So when we graduated from college, we opened a karate studio. And then I'm embarrassed to admit this, but not the karate stuff, but he decided he wanted to go to medical school. And I just thought, I don't want to run this karate school alone. And I don't have any science background. So, there's only one lawyer in my extended family, a large extended family. So it wasn't like I, thought, oh God, I want to be a lawyer. It's a family tradition or anything like that. I was like the first professional in my family. So, I went to law school because basically I couldn't do science. I didn't have that kind of a brain. And law school back then, it was all about analysis and logic. It was like logical puzzles, and which isn't very far from what you do when you construct a story. So there was something in my brain that made me suited to it, even though I had never aspired to it. So, and cases are stories. You study case law in law school, and they're just little stories. They're human stories about, people who are adverse to each other. So it's kind of fun, if you've got that kind of mind, you're reading stories all the time and figuring out, why one side is stronger and the other, and, all these curveballs. And so they're very, very alike. I think the same kind of brain it appeals to,
Who were your influences writing wise? Did you have influences?
No, I grew up with Twilight Zone, Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Hour, One Step Beyond. Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine was the first thing I ever subscribed to. I was like 11 or 12 years old, and I was just a junkie. And when I went to college, I filled my trunk with my entire collection of Alfred Hitchcock, and they're on my bookshelf right now. These old ones from like the 70s, and so short stories were, I think really informed my thinking process about dramatic structure. And then I read a ton of science fiction. I loved Ray Bradbury and Robert Sheckley, the old short story writers. And so I think that what they taught me subliminally, because I never really thought about this, as I was learning to put a story together, but I think what they taught me was the importance of a strong beginning, middle, and end, ending with some kind of a punch, and also compression, because I write in a very compressed way. And looking back, I think I was really influenced by those early experiences, much more than anything I read since. And I've never taken a writing class. I've just been self-taught, by reading like 100 books about writing, and then trying everything, and endlessly, trying this, and does this work, and does that work, and that kind of thing. So it's been a very hit or miss sort of education, but I do think that my strongest influences were the early ones, from Twilight Zone and Alfred Hitchcock.
I think that's fascinating. And those outlets, those shows, the books, they were such a goldmine for creator voices to get shorter stories out there. Do you know, you work in this field, is there a market for shorter stories today? We have so much access to information. We have, we all have Kindles, or, we have so much, digital technology, but I feel like maybe the short story, the short form fiction has become harder to find. Is that just me, or is that a...
I think that there are lots of online outlets. If you want to sell a short story, I think there's not a lot of money in it. Nor is there a lot of money in fiction writing, any kind of writing today, because there's just so much out there, and so much of it is free, that I think it's affected people's willingness to pay money for it.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of online mystery magazines. You can submit to Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine. That's my dream. That's my next goal, to try to get it, first of all, to learn to write a short story. That's what I want to do after True Crime Redux. My goal is to get into short story writing. And I'm planning to do it and to submit. But again, it's the learning curve that gets me, because to me, a short story is not just a shrunken novel, and it's not just a concept that didn't have enough legs to make a novel. It's about one idea, and you develop it in a very compressed way. So it's a different kind of writing, and it's exciting to me to learn how to do it. And then, of course, I'll have the pies in the face when I try to submit it to places. But, that's all. Failure is part of the learning process. I've learned more from my failures than I have from whatever successes I've had. I at one point tried to get into medical school after I'd been practicing law for like 15 years. I was a partner at a big firm, and I just had this epiphany. Like the minute I made partner, I had this epiphany, this isn't for me, and I went back to college, and I took physics and chemistry and all that stuff I'd been too afraid to take, 20 or 30 years earlier. And I applied to medical schools, and I didn't get in. It was like the first time I had ever really publicly fallen on my face, because I was the A student and all this. I was totally humiliated, and I had to resign my partnership at this big fancy law firm I was at, because the leave I had taken, had gone past the prescribed time, and I didn't have portable billable clients, so they were happy to just, give me the heave-ho, and I had to start at the bottom. I had to, I'd run out of my savings, and a criminal defense lawyer hired me for like $15 an hour, and he threw me into a courtroom for the first time in my life. And I had to learn that. And it was exhilarating, because it was scary and embarrassing and all this, but it was also exhilarating, because I felt like, well, I've already lost, whatever ridiculous reputation I had, so what do I have to lose? This is something new, and I'll try my best. And I just learned enormously from that. So, it makes it a lot less scary when you fall on your face in a really public way, and people say, oh, I knew she wouldn't get into medical school, that kind of thing, and then you pick yourself up off the floor. It's great training for publishing, because, in publishing, there's much more rejection than there ever is acceptance. And then even when you are published, there's the drive-by shooters on Amazon who just, give you 1 star, and they don't even say why, just to take you down, but you learn to just take that in your stride. And failure is what teaches you how to do that, because you got to get up the next morning, you got to pick yourself up the floor and move forward. So I personally love failure. I guess I shouldn't say that too publicly, but, because it just invites more. But, that's the truth of it,
Yeah, that's how you learn. You learn from failure. I agree with that 100%. That's such a great observation. As you're talking, I'm realizing how much of yourself is in your books and your, this is so you wrote legal. There's the whole Jackie Flowers series, which is sort of courtroom based, which makes sense given where you're coming from. But then you transition to sort of an art field, and as you're talking, I'm like, well, of course, because I assume you developed an interest in art, or you have an appreciation for art, and you just go all in, which is what it sounds like you seem to do. You just immerse yourself into this, and you're like, well, it just works its way into your fiction.
Yeah, I love the deep dive. I never took an art course, but I went to museums as a kid, and I love paintings. My husband and I have not valuable paintings, but paintings that we love. And when we travel, we always go to museums, and but I didn't know anything about art, and I'm not artistic myself. I don't doodle, and so I had to learn, and that was one of the attractions of leaving a character, Jackie Flowers, who was a defense lawyer, where I knew that world, and I knew the funny, crazy things that happened behind the scenes. So that was much easier for me to write. But then when I started to write about Lily Sparks, one of the thrills was that immersion into a new world where I knew nothing, and I could just go in with open eyes, a blank slate, and absorb everything that I could. And I had in my swim class, there was a paintings curator who I struck up a conversation with, and he opened lots of doors to me, to conservators. And I picked his brain, I asked him tons of questions, and he was generous enough to vet A Perfect Eye. That was the first Lily Sparks book, for everything having to do with art and museums. So, I was really lucky in that regard. And, there's something about artists, they're passionate and they put it all on the canvas, and that excited me about doing a series that was based on art crimes, because crimes, the ones I'm interested in or interested in writing about, spring from passion. And I thought it would be kind of fascinating to look at the way art and the passions behind the creation of art and the commission of certain types of crimes intersect. So that was sort of the genesis and the theme of the Lily Sparks books.
And that character has what is the title of that first book, A Perfect Eye. Is that a real thing? Do people have perfect eyes?
I mean, for I don't know, maybe centuries, the art world has turned on this notion that, there are certain people who have these powers of discernment, and, the experts, the art experts. And only pretty recently has that been challenged by technological advances where, people can subject paintings and stuff to tests and see how old they really are. But before that, it was always the eye of the connoisseur, So, I mean, there are certainly people who are highly trained and are really immersed in the art of a certain artist who are experts in that artist. And you could say they have a perfect eye for that artist or that genre, But I think, that gets disproven, by technology.
That's fascinating. Well, one of the things that I love about these books, especially the Lily Sparks novels, is that it marries the high, the elevated with art, and then murder, and you get into the gory details too. It's not like, and there was a body. I mean, you really describe everything. And it's this this interesting contrast between the two worlds, with the protagonist caught in the middle, and I just think it's a lot of fun. I love these books.
Well, they're fun to write.
And the new one is Object Lessons, which is it brings in sort of, each one of these has a hook. You're teaching us about art. You're teaching us about process. You teach us, as I'm sure you're discovering for yourself as you write about it in research, and then you once again you bring us with you as you write about these things. This is about crime scene dioramas, and the killer of Object Lessons is I guess inspired, recreating crime scenes from dioramas, and once again gory grisly murders, and our perfect eye protagonist has to use those skills to try to figure out what's going on. And it's a fascinating approach and a fascinating novel.
Well, it was inspired by two things. First was I always get my inspiration from real life, because there's nothing more fascinating than what real human beings do. And there was a woman, a Chicago heiress named Frances Glessner Lee, who was born in 1878 in Chicago. And she was frustrated and thwarted because she was just a brilliant kid, and she really wanted to go to college. She wanted to be a doctor, and her parents refused to send her to college, and they forced her into this awful society marriage instead, that of course fell apart. And so late in life, she was inspired by, she got into crime through a Harvard friend of her brother's, this guy named McGrath, who became a medical examiner, and he regaled her with stories of true crimes. And so in her 50s, she found an unlikely purpose in life, which was to create crime scene dioramas, these models of gory crime scenes to a scale of an inch to a foot. And she created those to be used by police departments to train cops to investigate crime scenes. So they were a training tool. And they're just these fantastic things. And they went on, and the best thing about them is that everything in them works. The window shades roll and unroll, and doors have hinges, and there's a little coffee pot in one with a strainer and grounds and stuff. And so, that was one inspiration. The other inspiration was the psychology of miniatures, because they have this really incredible power. Think of a snow globe. It's a world within a world, and looking at one, you feel like you're seeing the entire universe all at once. And when you hold it in your hand, you feel like you're holding the world in your hand. And if you shake it, you can make it snow. I mean, you are God. So it wasn't such a leap, to think that to construct a killer, who was triggered by the heady sense of power that miniatures can confer. So that's how that story came about.
I'm going to put links to these in the description of this video as well, so people can scroll down and just click. You don't have to go hunt for them. They're right there, and we'll send you right over to where you can buy these. What's next? Will you continue with the crime novels? I know you mentioned that you have this true crime project that's happening. Will you continue the other work as well?
I hope so. I'm really excited about the true crime thing coming out. So I have not started to work on another Lily Sparks, but I also really want to get into short stories, because it's a whole new genre for me. So I haven't exactly figured out what my next step is, but I'm going to keep writing, because writing for me is an expression of how I think. I mean, I write to figure out what I think about something. So it's integral to my being in the world, So I will keep writing.
Maybe your next short story, as you get into that, it should be about a second-degree black belt. Maybe a science fiction story about a second-degree black belt who owned a karate studio.
And ends up in a tiny miniature version of it, like a Twilight Zone thing.
Ends up in a snow globe with someone shaking it like God. Yes.
And you can shake the snow globe.
Oh, wow. Where can people, let's talk about your instructional stuff. Where can people follow you and keep up to date on everything that you're writing? And
well, the best thing is my website. It's Writer Kane with a K, writerkane.com. I know websites are antiquated, but I'm a little antiquated, but I keep that very up to date. I'm also on Facebook, at author Stephanie Kane, and I've got an Amazon Central page, author page on Amazon, and that's basically how I keep in touch. But I love, I'll tell you honestly, I love to get emails. People can email me through my website. I always answer emails. I love the contact. So it really juices me up to hear from people. So I like personal contact.
I'll put all those links in the description of this video, so people can they can click straight through and find.
So are you going to say the CerealAtMidnite connection in the book?
I have a quote. There's the critics sort of like right here. For Automat, it says, this is from my review of Automat. I wrote, wonderfully disorienting. They've pulled that from my review, and it's here inside. It's printed.
Well, you know where else you're in the book? Lily Sparks actually eats cereal at midnight in bed.
That's amazing. Wonderful. This has been so informative, so frankly, it's exciting to talk to you and to get a glimpse into this. I mean, I feel like we've just touched the tip of the iceberg. Maybe you can come back and talk to us when the next project.
I'd love to.
That
I
would
would
be
love to.
wonderful.
It's inspiring again, and there's so much that your story reminds us that you never finish learning. You just move on to the next thing and continue to learn that, and that's exciting to me. It really is. It inspires me because we're always on to, you know, speaking of books, we're always on to the next chapter, and I think that's you really go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think when you stop learning is when you start dying.
Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. And
You.
and remember, guys, everything's going to be in the description of this video. Please go over, check out these books. Please leave reviews on the platforms that they're available for sale so we can continue to get the word out about these. And once again, thank you so much. And guys, thank you for watching. So until next time, we'll catch you later.